Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Crime Crunchies. I am your host, Courtney C., a 27-year veteran of the media, and I'm so happy to be with you here today. We are going to be taking a deep dive into day 87 of the Nancy Guthrie Missing Case. But the first half is going to be spent mostly talking about Sheriff Chris Nanos, our favorite little gym rat, Chris Nanos. And then after we go through his 22-page response, we are going to get into a few updates on the Nancy Guthrie case. So stick around for those. So let me go ahead and share my screen and let's dive in. Please remember to subscribe and like and comment and share and all of those happy dappy things while I am getting set up. Thank you so much. All right. So Chris Nanos has, with nothing really much going on with the Nancy Guthrie case. I mean, we've had some updates, but not a whole heck of a lot. It feels very stalled. And even people like Brian Enton they don't have anybody who's really a person of interest at this time. And a lot of this, I feel like, could be tied back to Chris Nanos. And unfortunately, he's just got this winning personality that goes back 40 some years to the 80s when he was working at the El Paso Police Department. And I have to say that while it appears he does not have any behavioral issues working in Pima County, and his record with Pima County has no marks on it, I have to say that I really question that. People do not change that drastically, and he was really problematic in El Paso, which leads us to today, because a lot of things have come out after the Nancy Guthrie case unfolded, and a lot of Arizona media companies, including the Arizona Republic, really dove deep into Sheriff Nanos' background and pulled his work record from the El Paso Police Department and found that he had a lot of disciplinary issues and a lot of suspensions. And there are things that is in his work history that normally would have prevented him from actually getting hired with Pima County, even short of him getting arrested for gambling. Okay. And Pima County supervisors actually got together, and they are looking at legal loopholes to get rid of Nanos because he is an elected official. And one of the things that the county supervisors has really globbed onto is the fact that it appears Sheriff Nanos was not the most honest when he was hired on with Pima County. And so the county supervisors, and I'll just read this from AI. I asked for a review of what the county board of supervisors has asked Nanos to respond to. And the Pima County Board of Supervisors compelled Sheriff Chris Nanos to respond under oath to questions regarding his employment history, disciplinary actions, and leadership, including his decision to place political opponent Heather Lappin on leave during the 2024 campaign, accusations of misrepresenting his past, and handling of department budget/operations. So the key areas of inquiry and concern from the supervisors have included employment history, addressing potential inaccuracies in his past job record, particularly from his time as a young officer in El Paso, Texas, administrative actions, a detailed defense for placing Lieutenant Heather Lappin, his 2024 election opponent, on administrative leave, which was viewed by some as an ethical issue, leadership and operations, questions regarding his leadership approach, financial management, specifically exceeding his department budget, and how the PCSD manages operations, and response requirements. The board initially demanded a signed, sworn, and according to Supervisor Matt Hines, the submitted 22-page document was deemed problematic because it was not signed by Nanos and thus not a sworn oath document. So originally, the board requested these answers within 10 business days, and that was back on April 8th. following a unanimous vote to invoke a process that could potentially lead to his removal. The supervisors were set to review his response in an executive session on May 12th, 2026 to decide on further actions. And there are a few lawsuits. I believe Heather Lappin has filed a lawsuit against him because of what she feels is an unethical response to her candidacy in the election against Nanos, and how I believe she feels he retaliated against her. And then Sergeant Cross also has a lawsuit against him, and Sergeant Cross heads up one of the unions for Pima County sheriffs. And there's been a lot of retaliation that Nanos has done against people who go against him, question him, etc. And there's a lot of, I don't want to say it's nepotism, but basically people who have been able to move forward in the Pima County Sheriff's Department are people who are in Nanos' court, okay? People who are friends with him, who support him, yes men. And like I mentioned, I cannot see that his behavior would change so drastically from the things he was accused of when he was a younger man in El Paso. And I believe everybody should get a second chance. Obviously, he was a young man at the time and, could have been immature or had anger issues, etc. And people can change. But just seeing how the things that he's alleged to have done does not tell me that he has changed his personality and how he deals with coworkers. What it tells me is that he's in a power position now, and he's on a power trip, and he's able to make things in his record probably go away and make things happen because of his power and control things and make people's lives miserable. So knowing what the supervisors asked Nanos to do, I do have the 22-page response dated April 21st to the Honorable Chair and members, Pima County Board of Supervisors, from Jan Lusher, County Administrator, RE response from Sheriff Nanos. And the memo reads, I am sharing the attached report received on April 21st, 2026 from Fraser, Ryan Goldberg, and Arnold LLP. These are the attorneys for Sheriff Nanos. This document includes Sheriff Chris Nanos' responses to a series of written questions requested by the Pima County Board of Supervisors. And I had gone into some of this based on Michael Ruiz's X post, but I didn't get the entire document. And this looks very long. It is 22 pages. I might just jump around, but what I really want to do is, it looks like on page 13, the response is signed by James M. Cool, who is the attorney for Sheriff Chris Nanos. I'm looking through to see if there's anything that Chris Nanos has actually signed, because he was asked for a sworn response, which is basically, it's the same as testimony. So if you were requested a sworn oath response, that means under oath of perjury, your responses are true to the best of your knowledge and can be treated under perjury as well. And yep, what we're seeing here is nothing signed by Chris Nanos. There's no notary that is confirming Chris Nanos is in front of a notary with his identification, signing in front of a notary. And I don't even know if this was filed with the court. This looks just like literally a letter. So honestly, this response does not qualify and resolve the request from the County Board of Supervisors. And I think I know why. I would imagine that his attorney has suggested that they do this response from his attorney, because Sheriff Nanos having any type of response that admits that he was dishonest in his application is probably immediate grounds for termination. And I feel like Sheriff Nanos has painted himself in a corner. And I'm definitely putting May 12th on my calendar because, as it says here, response requirements. The board initially demanded a signed, sworn, and according to Supervisor Matt Hines, the submitted 22-page document was deemed problematic because it was not signed by Nanos. So he has not done what they asked. And honestly, I think this is just a delay tactic. This comes across as a delay tactic, in my opinion. So let's read the first page or two, and then let's just kind of see how it goes. And then if it looks like it's going to be too long and involved, I can always switch to some of my videos on Nancy Guthrie. So, dear Patricia and Mark, and this is sent via email and U.S. mail from Attorney Cool. I have been engaged to represent Sheriff Chris Nanos in connection with the Pima County Board of Supervisors inquiry detailed in your letter dated April 7th, 2026. In the interest of promoting clarity and ensuring an accurate public record, Sheriff Nanos accepts the board's invitation to respond in writing. Au contraire, mon cher. But he hasn't, okay? This is not Sheriff Nanos responding under oath with a notary. I have consulted extensively with Sheriff Nanos about the topics raised in your letter and am authorized to provide the following responses on his behalf. Sure, you absolutely are authorized to provide these responses, but it does not complete the request from the County Board of Supervisors, which is very unfortunate. So while some of this detail is great, it's not a sworn oath document or response, and it does not qualify. So, topic number 1, the sheriff's employment history. At the outset, allow me to note that ARS 11253 does not authorize an unlimited inquisition. Rather, Sheriff Nanos is only obliged to report on those matters connected with the duties of his office. The sheriff's duties are defined by ARS 11441. They include keeping the peace, arresting and detaining those suspected of criminal activity, preventing and suppressing riots or insurrection, securing county courthouses, overseeing and operating the county jail, and effectuating service of process. That is all. See ARS 11441A1-8. The sheriff's statutory duties are distinct from those of a sworn peace officer regulated by the Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training Board, AZ Post. This distinction is significant because it confirms the sheriff's employment history is irrelevant to the performance of his duties as an elected official subject to oversight by the Board of Supervisors. Likewise, giving testimony in a civil lawsuit and managing the department's website are not among the duties of his office. Okay, so this looks like it's in response to, I think the question the county had is why on the website, the department's website, it showed that Nanos left El Paso Police Department in 1984 when he actually left in 1982. And it looks like they're saying it was a clerical error, but nobody knows any of the information except for what Nanos would have given them. So, nevertheless, in the interest of transparency and in the spirit of cooperation, the sheriff has authorized me to respond to the board's questions as follows, which again is great, but the sheriff needs to respond under oath. Number 1, the circumstances of Sheriff Nanos' departure from the El Paso Police Department. Sheriff Nanos resigned from the El Paso Police Department in 1982. At the time of his resignation, he held the rank of corporal. His resignation came in the wake of a dispute with a supervisor over the towing of vehicles. The supervisor wanted to impose a 3-day suspension for insubordination. Sheriff Nanos appealed that recommended discipline to the chief, who found in favor of the supervisor. Rather than accept a 3-day suspension, Sheriff Nanos offered to resign in lieu of discipline. The chief accepted his offer and Sheriff Nanos resigned. And I think this might be fudged a little bit. I've read other documents that showed that they were going to fire him. This wasn't a suspension. They were going to fire him. The sheriff's dates of employment, as reflected in application materials, resumes, and prior testimony. All documents Sheriff Nanos submitted to the county when he applied show his dates of employment with the El Paso Police Department were from 1976 to 1982, which is accurate. For the board's reference, I've attached a copy of the resume Sheriff Nanos submitted as Exhibit 1. Some time ago, Sheriff Nanos was alerted that the department's website incorrectly stated he was employed at the El Paso Police Department 1976 to 1984. Some time ago, I mean, we're talking 2 months ago. Upon learning of the error, Sheriff Nanos immediately instructed staff to correct it. Since then, all staff have been instructed that any biographical data about the sheriff included in public-facing communications must be reviewed for accuracy and approved by his office prior to publication. Again, fudging and stretching. The sheriff's prior disciplinary history, including suspensions. First, I must reiterate that the sheriff's minimal disciplinary history is irrelevant to the performance of his official duties. The sheriff was the subject of robust public scrutiny during the election, and the public record includes information about his decorated career as a sworn peace officer. Armed with this information, the voters of Pima County elected him as sheriff. Whatever the sheriff did or did not do before being elected is necessarily unrelated to his performance of the duties of his office, notwithstanding the impropriety of this question. The sheriff has authorized me to respond as follows. While employed with the El Paso Police Department, Sheriff Nanos was the subject of various disciplinary actions, which included counseling, reprimands, and suspensions. That discipline and the actions that gave rise to it happened more than 4 decades ago. The sheriff has little specific recollection of those events. Wow. However, the sheriff notes that when he applied with the county in 1984, he was subject to a standard background check, which included completion of the county job application, interviews of his past employers and personnel references, an oral interview, a psychological evaluation, and polygraph testing. Moreover, before he became a certified peace officer in Arizona, his fitness to serve employment history were thoroughly reviewed by ALEOAC. At every step in the hiring process, the sheriff was truthful and forthcoming. I don't think so. And the very first sentence is what's appalling here. Minimal disciplinary history. I watch a lot of shows with ex-FBI and, the same ones you guys are probably watching. And like Chris McDonough has asked several people that he's interviewed and said, have you ever had 37 days of suspension in 5 years? And they've said no, like never been suspended ever. So the fact that this guy had 37 days suspension, was arrested for gambling, and they left that out. Put an inmate who was restrained in ICU for 15 days, in ICU, and Nanos was suspended for 15 days with no pay. I mean, this guy, it's scary. I could not imagine working for him. While employed with the El Paso, okay, I think I read that one. Counseling, yeah, he's an interesting character. Last, I am aware of media reports suggesting Sheriff Nanos was somehow dishonest in sworn deposition testimony he gave in the manner of Cross v. Nanos. Not so. In that deposition, the sheriff was asked, have you ever received discipline as a law enforcement officer? He responded, yes. In a follow-up question, he was asked, did you ever receive a discipline that rose to the level of a suspension? He responded, no. And I think this is where he said he thought he was a bad driver. So again, he's really good at fudging. So he responded, no. Bad faith media reports have divorced this testimony from its context to suggest Sheriff Nanos was untruthful about his disciplinary history with the El Paso Police Department, but context matters. Both immediately before and immediately after the question about whether he had ever been suspended, Sheriff Nanos was questioned about the Arizona Peace Officers' Bill of Rights. As you know, the Peace Officers' Bill of Rights details the substantive and procedural due process rights afforded to Arizona law enforcement officers. It is 100% correct that Sheriff Nanos was never suspended during his 4 decades of decorated and faithful service with the Pima County Sheriff's Department. That's true. However, Sheriff Nanos was suspended more than 40 years ago while employed by El Paso Police Department. In the context of his live deposition, Sheriff Nanos did not understand the question related to discipline with a different agency not governed by the Arizona Peace Officers' Bill of Rights. I highly doubt that. Again, he's the smartest guy in the room. In reviewing the transcript shortly after his deposition, Sheriff Nanos spotted his misunderstanding and promptly notified his attorney. Oh my goodness. Wow, what a good guy. For the board's reference, I have attached the relevant excerpt from his deposition. So he perjured himself. I mean, he perjured himself, and he knows he did. Sorry, I got to drink my Coke Zero. It's the only way I get through the day. Topic number 2, the Lappin and Cross disciplinary actions. Before responding substantively, I must note that both Sergeant Cross and former Lieutenant Lappin have filed lawsuits against the sheriff in connection with the discipline they received following sustained findings of misconduct. Both lawsuits are ongoing. Because this topic touches on active litigation against the county, any discussion about it should take place in executive session. Moreover, the sheriff must be mindful of the impact his public statements in response to this inquiry could have on the litigation. I am quite certain the board would not wish for the public nature of its inquiry to create potential liability for the county in these cases where none currently exists. In addition, personnel matters are typically confidential. It would not be appropriate to discuss the allegations or findings against former Lieutenant Lappin and Sergeant Cross, nor the department's internal investigative processes in this public forum. Notwithstanding these considerations, the sheriff has authorized me to respond as follows. The disciplinary process for all PCSD employees is rooted in long settled county policy and well-documented department policy and procedures. Both Sergeant Cross and former Lieutenant Lappin were suspected of violating department and county policy. Consistent with long-standing department policy, these reports of misconduct were investigated by Internal Affairs and presented to the PCSD's disciplinary review panel. The panel was comprised of members of the PCSD command staff, the PCSD legal advisor, a member of the county attorney's office, members from the PCSD Citizens Advisory Review Board, and various department employee association members. After hearing the evidence, the panel unanimously sustained the complaints. As disciplined, the panel recommended a letter of reprimand for former Lieutenant Lappin and termination for Sergeant Cross. Because the panel's recommended discipline for Sergeant Cross involved termination, it was reviewed by Sheriff Nanos per policy. During that review process, Sergeant Cross provided a statement admitting he had violated policy as found by the panel and requested leniency. Specifically, Sergeant Cross asked the sheriff to issue a formal letter of reprimand in lieu of termination. This is interesting because Sergeant Cross appeared to be taking responsibility for his misconduct. Sheriff Nanos reduced the discipline from termination to a letter of reprimand over the objections of his command staff. I don't think this is true at all. Despite getting exactly what he wanted and heedless of his own admission, Sergeant Cross immediately grieved the lenient discipline he received. That is insane. I cannot believe this. No, this did not happen. Former Lieutenant Lappin likewise appealed. The twin grievances were submitted to County Human Resources Director Kathy Boland, and the grievance committee conducted an independent investigation of both disciplinary decisions. Following that independent investigation, the grievance committee recommended the county administrator uphold the discipline. The county administrator adopted the recommendation and denied both grievances. I don't think this is true at all, because Sergeant Cross is still working there, and there's no way. I mean, and Sergeant Cross really can't respond to this because there is a lawsuit. I think I think Nanos lives in La La Land. The implication that the discipline given to Sergeant Cross was somehow retaliatory or uneven is absurd and unfair. Sergeant Cross was disciplined as a result of a sustained finding that he violated the Hatch Act. Indeed, before any discipline was ever contemplated, Sergeant Cross was notified that his off-duty behavior violated department policy and federal law, and was informally counseled on how to continue his protected speech activity without violating policy. Sergeant Cross ignored that advice and continued to break federal law in violation of department policy. His conduct was reviewed by a diverse panel of independent fact finders who unanimously concluded he had violated the Hatch Act. Those independent adjudicators recommended he be terminated. In an abundance of generosity and the good faith belief Sergeant Cross had accepted responsibility for his actions, Sheriff Nanos granted Sergeant Cross' request for leniency and reduced his termination to a mere letter of reprimand. In response, Sergeant Cross immediately reversed course, recanted his acceptance of responsibility, and grieved the discipline he requested. Even before the committee rejected his grievance, Sergeant Cross filed a lawsuit. Any suggestion that Sheriff Nanos retaliated against Sergeant Cross by sparing him from termination, as his peers recommended, blinks at reality. Page 6. Likewise, any suggestion of impropriety or an uneven application of departmental policy in connection with former Lieutenant Lappin's disciplinary process lacks a basis in fact. Former Lieutenant Lappin was suspected of multiple violations of PCSD policy based on credible evidence. That evidence merited investigations. So, in an abundance of caution and in keeping with department policy, former Lieutenant Lappin was placed on administrative leave with pay pending completion of the investigations. While on paid leave, former Lieutenant Lappin was subject to precisely the same policies and requirements as any other department employee on administrative leave. Although she was required to remain available during her normal working hours, her freedom of movement was not restricted, subject only to long-standing departmental requirements governing paid administrative leave. Likewise, although she was ordered not to discuss the ongoing investigation consistent with department policy, she was free to engage in all other protected speech activity, including continuing to campaign against Sheriff Nanos. At the conclusion of the department's investigation, former Lieutenant Lappin was given a letter of reprimand, the exact punishment the discipline review panel recommended. That discipline was upheld after review when County Human Resources denied her grievance. To be clear, the allegations made by former Lieutenant Lappin have been extensively litigated in both federal court and the court of public opinion. Former Lieutenant Lappin grieved her discipline, and that grievance was denied. Former Lieutenant Lappin filed a lawsuit that has not resulted in any finding of wrongdoing by Sheriff Nanos or the PCSD. The Department of Justice conducted a review and determined there was no evidence to support an investigation. Moreover, these allegations were reported on by local media exhaustively in the run-up to the 2024 election and were rejected by Pima County voters. Despite all this unrelenting scrutiny, there has never been a sustained finding critical of the department's discipline of former Lieutenant Lappin. That is no accident. Page 7. Any appearance of impropriety that resulted from former Lieutenant Lappin's placement on administrative leave is the unfortunate result of a 2024 change to county policy that allowed county employees to run for county office without leaving their jobs. Before 2024, employees vying for county office were placed on leave without pay to ensure that their political aspirations did not prevent them from doing their jobs nor adversely affect the operation of their department. It is not surprising that the first election following this regrettable change in policy showcased the predictable ways in which active employees running for county office can adversely impact departmental operations. In order to strengthen current processes, the sheriff plans to meet with County Administrator Lesher to discuss amending County Personnel Policy 8-108 to once more allow candidates for county office to be placed on leave without pay until after the election. Wow, that's a mouthful. Supposedly, I believe Lieutenant Lappin has accused, and I might be incorrect here, but I believe that she has stated she was under house arrest or something. I might be incorrect, but there's something going on with that. And it's odd because the lead in to topic number 2, the attorney for Sheriff Nanos, not Sheriff Nanos, but his attorney said that it would be improper to comment since this is under litigation, and yet he continues to talk about it. So that's a mouthful. Okay, topic number 3, coordination with federal immigration officials. The PCSD's interactions with federal immigration officials are primarily governed by Chapter 10, Section 8 or Section 7 of PCSD's Rules and Regulations, which can be found on the department's website. The policies speak for themselves. Broadly, they confirm the following. PCSD employees do not inquire about how a person entered the U.S. unless that is a valid element of a criminal investigation. PCSD employees do not inquire about immigration status while at a school unless that is a valid element of a criminal investigation. PCSD employees do not inquire about immigration status at all during consensual encounters with the public. PCSD employees do not inquire about the immigration status of purported crime victims or witnesses. In addition, these policies govern PCSD's interaction and cooperation with federal law enforcement. PCSD employees cooperate with federal law enforcement officials when necessary to ensure public safety or law enforcement officer safety. PCSD employees do not participate in immigration checkpoints except when necessary to enforce a state or local law. PCSD employees will comply with international treaties inasmuch as such treaties require notification of a detention be given to a foreign consulate. However, PCSD employees may not affirmatively inquire whether a detainee is a foreign national unless the detainee volunteers that information or the employee has reasonable grounds to suspect as much. Consistent with these policies, PCSD no longer allows ICE to assign agents to the Pima County Adult Detention Center, the jail. The jail also no longer accepts ICE detainees nor administrative warrants from ICE. In general, Sheriff Nanos has promulgated policies aimed at focusing PCSD's resources on ensuring public safety and enforcing state and local laws rather than on federal immigration enforcement. Nevertheless, PCSD remains committed to supporting its federal law enforcement partners when they may require assistance not directly related to immigration enforcement, such as the situations involving public safety or officer safety. I'm not sure exactly what this is. I'm probably going to skip because I'm not sure. Let's skip to the management of department's budget because I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. Okay, the board's question unfairly implies that Sheriff Nanos has failed to properly manage the department's budget. Not so. 3 of the last 5 fiscal years, the department has performed under budget. In the 2 years, department expenditures exceeded its budget. The overruns were minimal. Under the sheriff's management, the department has spent just 95.87% of its budget over a 5-year span. The figures below prove the sheriff's sound fiscal budget. Okay, so budget expenditures, 793. Let's see if there are any years that he was really, really off. I mean, it's not really that off. I mean, if this is true, he's over by he's under. The repeated instances mentioned in your letter is an apparent reference to monthly reports given to the board by the PCSD Finance Office. These monthly reports have been provided to the board for several decades as a tool to help the department and county officials forecast future expenses and revenue. Indeed, the creation and use of these projections has been critical to the department's budgetary fidelity. All right, I'm not going to go through all of this. I mean, if these are true numbers, I mean, you know, that's all that they're asked to do. If he was supposed to come in under 793 million and he came in at 787 million, then he's within budget. He's under 4%. So, I mean, then that's good. I mean, I think people just want transparency. So let's just read in conclusion. The sheriff appreciates this opportunity to answer the board's questions, but he hasn't, and to document his tireless efforts, which he hasn't, under oath, to protect and serve the people of Pima County. Serving as sheriff is a great honor, and he looks forward to achieving even greater success. If you'd like to follow up on the topics discussed, please contact me and I will work with the sheriff to provide an appropriate response. Okay, first of all, I mean, I guess he wants to pay this attorney, and I don't know if the sheriff's department, because when you're a sheriff, you get a certain amount of leniency, and some legal things are paid for. So Nanos is probably not paying. I'm guessing he's not paying for this attorney. This is probably coming out of county funds, possibly, but I don't think that he has qualified the expectations of the county board of supervisors. This is not signed by Nanos. It's not sworn. And again, it's really a waste of everybody's time and my time just reading this, because technically what's going to happen is they're probably going to end up having him come in and maybe even do a deposition, because this does not satisfy what they asked for. Because he can't be perjured for anything that's in this letter if it's inaccurate, because this is a statement his attorney gave. And I really think that Nanos knows that he was not honest, and I think that he knows he's going to get in trouble for perjuring himself, and he's painted himself into a corner. I think that this is just kicking the can down the road from his attorney. They're delaying this process, knowing that the county supervisors probably only meet monthly. So this gave him another month, but this is not the last we've heard of this. I can guarantee you. And very interesting. And the fact that the supervisor, Matt Hines, deemed it problematic is, I would say that's pretty politically correct. So, all right. So there's our update on little tiny gym rat Nanos. I would like to switch over to, this is a TMZ video. Okay. And we have a couple videos with FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente, and he's been doing the rounds lately. And there's one thing that Jim Clemente talks about that I don't personally agree with, but what do I know? Okay, he's the FBI dude, and he may know. He claims that he believes there's only one abductor and not a group of people. but he does talk about the blood evidence. And I've even had shows where I talked about the blood on the front porch looked like a shoe print. He does state that it could be a shoe print. But he's been coming out lately with some stuff, and it looks like there's a 20-minute video on TMZ where he's saying the abductor points to Uber driver, but they've already questioned the Uber driver, and the Uber driver actually had a camera, according to what we know, which is only what we think we know. Okay, let's start playing this video, and I may not play the whole thing. I'm just going to see if it looks like it's got some good information on what Jim Clemente seems, because I really respect him. He's a smart guy. So let's just dig in.
Know for certain is that she was not covered completely in a blanket and carried out of the house. That didn't happen. They were not a sophisticated criminal. That this is not something they've done before. This is far from a cold case. They're going to have his name and his age and his address in a matter of weeks.
Hey guys, it's Jackson Buhai here with TMZ. Now we are coming up to the nearly 3-month mark since Nancy Guthrie was initially abducted. Today,
Nancy.
Joining me is Jim Clemente. Now he is a retired FBI supervisory agent and profiler, and he also runs the Real Crime Profile podcast.
Really quick, I mean, honestly, I'm just so sick in my heart about what happened to Nancy. It just would be my worst nightmare to have this happen to me or my loved one. And so I've been sticking with this story because that poor woman, that's all I'll say. We'll dig back. I just feel so bad for her. It makes me sick.
So feel free to go and check that out. Mr. Clemente, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
So it seems like as things evolve with this case, every question that gets answered comes with more questions. You know, a retired FBI special agent recently said that the abductor is most likely a Tucson local. We've interviewed a genealogist that says it could be a matter of weeks that authorities get a DNA match and we actually nail down who the person that conducted this crime could actually be. And what you're bringing to the table is that we can learn a lot about the blood spatter patterns. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. Blood spatter at a crime scene tells a story, a particular moment in time. And it can tell us what happened and didn't happen before and some of what might have happened after. So in this particular case, I'll refer to the first image, which is, it shows two distinct blood spatter patterns, one in the upper center and one in the lower right. And these are very close to the front door. And what these tell me initially is that this is most likely at the front door where Nancy Guthrie refused to cooperate or put up her last stand, basically, against the abductor. And if there are no blood spatter patterns in the house, I think that totally confirms this, that this is where she decided, that she would not cooperate any further.
I agree
and
completely
as a
with
result,
this. At the front
abductor
door,
assaulted her and basically struck her in the face, the mouth or nose area, or both. And
that was my theory, regardless of if there's more than one or two. I believe that they had her staged. They woke her up. They probably staged her in the living room. They were going to take her out the back door, probably realized she couldn't walk, then decided to pull the car up to the front door, start taking her out the front door. And she's realizing, oh, these guys are really taking me. I'm not going anywhere. She probably put up a fight. And that's where I think that she got either socked in the stomach or the face. So I completely agree. I think she fought them at the very end, trying not to get out that front door. She fought them. And as a result, somebody may have hit her in the stomach or the face. And this is where Jim is talking about the blood.
He then aspirated blood and then coughed it up. If you go to the second image, which is a close-up of the one from the previous one on the upper center, you'll see two distinct types of patterns, maybe three. And the larger droplets that are sort of in a circle around this dropped almost straight down from her face. And her face then was within inches of the ground when she coughed up. She aspirated and then coughed up this blood that you see, these tiny droplets. Because of the viscosity of blood, in order to get blood droplets that small, there has to be some speed behind it. And medium velocity droplets, like we see here, generally come from coughing or sneezing, whereas high velocity blood droplets would be from a gunshot wound. So there's no evidence of that here at all. But here you also have several droplets that are sort of hollow rings. They're larger in size and they're hollow rings. That's because there was air in that droplet. It was a bubble. And when it hit the ground, it then burst, and you only see the ring of blood instead of the solid droplets of blood that you see elsewhere in this image. So the fact that the larger droplets they don't have much of a tail. There are two that appear to maybe have a little bit of tail, giving us directionality. If she was moving at that time, then there would be tails on all of these big droplets, and it would be they would be pointing in the direction that she was traveling. I don't see that here.
Yep,
so
hanging.
I know that she was either on her knees or hunched over very low.
Bad.
And her mouth was very close to the ground when she made this blood spatter pattern, when she coughed up this blood, because of the narrow nature of these spots. They're fairly well contained. So what we know for certain is that she was not covered completely in a blanket or a tarp and carried out of the house. That didn't happen. And I believe it also rules out multiple offenders at this point, because if she had been under the control of two or more offenders, they would have had no reason to let her drop to the ground. If there was one offender who struck her in the face and then she fell to the ground, then he picked her up, which would account for the fact that the blood droplets dissipate and almost disappear as they then travel towards the vehicle at the end of the walkway. So this tells us a story that at this point, I believe she stood her ground and was punished for it in order to get her back into compliance. And then I believe she was carried away, probably with her face facing upwards, which is why you don't see more concentrated droplets of blood from that point forward towards.
And I believe they have that on video.
What I'm wondering is, it's been said that her phone disconnected from her pacemaker approximately 45 minutes after the initial entry was made to the house. That's when we see porch guy on that Nest doorbell camera. And then it seems like there was no signs of a true struggle that happened within the house, only on the front porch. In your career, have you ever seen a case like this? And what could that possibly mean? Why did these attackers or attacker spend so much time in this house before going ahead with the abduction?
All right, well, there are multiple questions there. And the answer overall is absolutely. I've seen this before. We don't know exactly when he made entry into the house. It could have been
hours before,
minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes after we saw him at the front door. But we do know from Savannah's statement that the back doors were propped open. So he may have done that to just prevent himself from getting trapped inside. In other words, if he got inside and he was faced with a gun or the police or a lot of screaming, that he would have had an easy way to get out.
And this also leads me to think that this could be one of the South American theft groups, because they have a playbook. The outfit, the clothing, the backpack, the ski mask, I mean, they know what they're doing. And if this is true, leaving the back door open for an easy escape path, I believe is something that one of these organized theft groups would do. And while they typically don't abduct people, it is a means of money. And their level of violence can be escalating. So just because it hasn't been their MO doesn't mean that it isn't an MO.
And that may have been the reason he did that. For whatever reason, he spent a lot more time in that house than should have been necessary or would have been necessary to simply abduct her. And when you say, is this consistent? The fact that there was no signs of a struggle until getting outside, really, on the front porch, The fact is, we all know he had a gun, a very visible gun in his crotch area. And I'm certain that he used that to control her. And if you're an 84-year-old woman who has trouble hearing and is aroused in the middle of the night by a stranger in a full mask, face mask, it's frightening. It's frightening as hell. And she most likely would have complied, especially since he had a gun. It was probably pointing at her. And she got out of bed and she went downstairs with him. And then when she realized that she was being taken away from the home, she fought at that point. And that's why you see the blood spatter on that front porch area. You were a supervisory special agent. I'm wondering if you were working this case in the Phoenix FBI field office right now. You know, we're approaching nearly the 3-month mark since she was abducted. What do you think would be some of the things you're doing right now to further this investigation? Well, the most promising thing that can be done is the forensic genetic genealogy. If they actually have isolated a profile of this offender, then there's absolutely no question they're going to identify him. They're going to find him. They're going to have his name and his age and his address in a matter of weeks, if they did isolate that. If not, the best thing that law enforcement could be doing is basically finding out every single person she had contact with over the last weeks, months, years, even a decade. And the same with Savannah. Because Savannah is a celebrity, we may be dealing with somebody who was basically a celebrity stalker, somebody who felt in their mind they had a delusion that they had a reason to have a relationship with her, and she may not have reciprocated that just in their own mind. And that could have given them cause to try to hurt her by abducting her mother. The reason why I feel this is a very strong possibility is that they didn't send a ransom note privately to the family. They sent it to the media.
Correct.
That tells me a very important difference between almost every other kidnapping case with a ransom that I've ever seen. And that is, they usually want privacy. They want secrecy. They don't want the media and the police involved. Because as soon as the media is involved, the police will be involved. And they're trying to avoid.
Which is a good point. And that leads to them potentially knowing that Miss Guthrie was Savannah's mother, especially that they wanted attention. And I agree with this completely.
That generally. So it tells me what they wanted was the publicity. They wanted the attention of Savannah Guthrie, and they got it.
I like this
guy. She talked directly to them. She made several videos.
We're in line.
She apparently sent a note back, and all of that.
Well, and so many of you true crimers, I say this on so many shows, you guys are logical thinkers. You're problem solvers, you're critical thinkers. And, you know, I enjoy listening to him talk because everything he's saying, other than he thinks it was one person, everything that he's saying is exactly what I have thought. But you all have thought a lot of the same things too. It isn't just me. We're all the people who are interested in this. I think that we have that kind of skill of studying people and understanding crimes and why they happen and motive.
Could have been exactly what this offender wanted. Now, I believe that they thought they were more prepared than they actually were. Obviously, their actions and inactions around
I don't think they wanted her dead.
Show that they were not a sophisticated criminal, that this is not something they had done before.
He messed up.
This is someone who really thought they were prepared, but showed up in an outfit that was light in color for a night operation, with reflective straps that identified a backpack that is only sold by one retailer. These are major mistakes. He held up his hand to cover the camera and may have
I have a tattoo.
Showed that he had a wrist tattoo on that arm. All of these things are major mistakes, and they're going to be reasons that he is going to be caught.
It's been said as well from, again, a former retired FBI special agent, that the person in that Nest doorbell video is likely a Tucson local. I'm wondering what you think.
Well, I do believe that the highest probability is that.
I think they could be associated with that restaurant where they had the interview.
it is somebody that has some passing connection to Nancy. In other words, that could have been recent in pre-attack surveillance, or it could be for a long time ago because they're local. I think.
Well, and another reason why, because this guy sent the ransom letters, we do believe that at least or three of the ransom letters were from the actual kidnappers. The fact that they sent them to TMZ in the local Tucson shows he's local, and I do believe that segment of the Today Show where they had lunch at the Mexican restaurant with Savannah and Nancy and Annie. I think that if somebody wants that kind of attention and wants money, saw the opportunity with the cameras, knowing that this would get media attention. At first, I thought, if this guy didn't know that Nancy was Savannah's mother, he's probably pooping blue Smurf poo-poos because he didn't realize the Pandora's box he was opening, meaning he had no idea this was going to blow up as big as it is. But I think if there's somebody who was working at that restaurant and saw the Today Show cameras and saw the interview, realized that Nancy, because this was a restaurant they go to a lot. I think it's not that far from Nancy's house. I think that this guy saw that and that's all he needed.
I think either is possible. I think it's somebody that possibly was an Uber or Lyft driver, possibly was a repair person that came into the house or delivered packages or took care of the lawn or the pool, that they had some innocent interaction with her in which Nancy may have mentioned her daughter, and this person gleaned that she lived alone, that she was vulnerable, and that she had the connection to this famous person. All of that tells me that they at least spent some time in the Tucson area before this abduction. I don't know if they were actually local, but
I think they're local, and I do think it has to do with that restaurant and the fact that this segment was filmed like over a year or two ago for the Today Show. This person could have moved on. Who knows what kind of records they have. So I think it was probably someone who was working at the restaurant or in connection with the restaurant, saw the camera crew, saw the opportunity for the money and the notoriety.
May have gone there for that reason, to find out as much as they could about her.
Many have called the investigation at this point a cold case. Again, nearly 3 months have passed. Have you ever seen an investigation like this one, where it goes for 3 months without any meaningful leads, at least to the public's knowledge, before a breakthrough happens?
Absolutely. It happens all the time. But this is you hit on the point. Without the public's knowledge.
Yeah.
Without the public's knowledge is how most investigations like this, especially when somebody's life was in the balance, they should be conducted because the investigators have to keep things secret so that they don't have people interfering with their investigative process. But the fact that we don't know doesn't mean that they don't know. And the fact that I do believe that I've heard reported that the FBI has a DNA sample potentially from this offender, and that they are performing forensic genetic genealogy process on it, so that the answer will be coming out soon.
Something else I'm wondering is that, when we spoke to our genetic genealogy expert, she said that, in a house like Nancy Guthrie's, there could be hundreds, even thousands of different DNA samples. How would the FBI know that the DNA sample they've gotten is one belonging to the suspect here?
You use the word no. They wouldn't know unless and until they actually identify the person and find that that person was responsible. They will have a high probability of getting a DNA sample from him if they got it from the doorknob on her door, on her bedroom door.
Well, and it could have been a hair that, and if it's a short hair, they're going to know what Nancy's hair looks like. And if this is a short hair that looks like a male hair, then they're going to have, done some sort of comparison. But I mean, we don't know if this is going to be this guy's. And I can say that they have taken DNA from anybody that they know that they've been able to interview that's been in that home. So they've probably already crossed out all those people. So it's hopeful, but I still feel like it's kind of the whole glove gate thing. We don't know.
Or her front door, the bed sheets, the light in her room, something connected they knew was connected to this abduction. He could have discarded something. Maybe he ripped off her watch. Maybe he grabbed her pillow and put it over her face so she wouldn't scream. I don't know what the facts are of this particular abduction, but there would be ways investigatively to try to narrow that down. Of course, there's going to be DNA samples from many people in any house, but if they can tie it to a particular location and point in time, then they can actually minimize the chance that it's not related to the crime. And they may have to do this with multiple samples, and that might be why it's taking so long. I would not at all think that they would only have gotten one sample of one male that wasn't related to the family. I'm sure that they must have taken samples from male family members to make sure that they could rule them out. And then anybody else that they knew that was in that house, they would also take samples from them to rule them out.
Based on the information you have at hand, does it seem like more than one perpetrators are involved here?
I see no evidence at all that more than one perpetrator was involved. And I won't speculate that somebody was involved if there's no evidence of it. I mean, we saw one guy at the front of the house,
which is
apparently not just that day, but at an earlier time as well without the backpack.
Good point.
I don't know if that was the same day or if that was days before, but there's no indication that there were other people involved, especially when I realized that the blood spatter evidence on the front porch indicates that she actually went down to the ground.
That's a fair point.
And that tells me that she was not being carried by two people or even assisted in walking by two people, because I don't think they would ever have let her fall to the ground if that were the case.
You're saying the blood spatter indicates to you that it's highly likely that only one person was involved in this abduction. Would you say that's accurate?
At that scene, yes.
At that scene. Okay. And do you entertain the idea of a getaway, considering that the trail of blood stops at the end of the walkway before we get to the road?
No, I mean, because I think she was carried to the car by the person after that person struck her in the face. And she went down and coughed up this blood. But also, you mentioned earlier, it was 42 minutes between the time he was playing with that camera and the time her device disconnected from her phone or her watch. And this guy was taking his time. He wasn't in a rush. And a getaway driver is somebody you leave waiting because you want to get out in 90 seconds, not 42 minutes.
Interesting. I think you provide a different insight to anybody I've interviewed before.
Well, and somebody's mentioned that he could have, the one guy, porch guy, could have been on drugs, or he could have a mental health issue. There are some people who are very calm and have nabbed people and unalived people, and they're very calm. They look at people as a tool because of mental illness. So could be any of those.
Well, I've worked thousands of abduction cases and bank robbery cases and kidnapping cases and sexual assault cases over the course of my career. And we actually, at the BAU, the Behavioral Analysis Unit in the FBI, where the profilers are, is actually part of the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime. We study all the violent crime in the United States and much of it across the world. So we're in a unique position in that we get to actually do this our entire time in the FBI. And therefore, we have exposure to a greater variety and a greater number of each type of case that most agents and most law enforcement officers don't have. That's why we actually teach law enforcement across this country and around the world.
No, I agree. And what I was going to say was, we've interviewed other people from the FBI that have entertained the idea of a second perpetrator. But I like what you're doing. You're taking the evidence you have at face value, and you're not speculating. And I think it's interesting to entertain the idea that it could have been an Uber driver. It could have been someone that she knew, a construction worker doing work on her house. Something I haven't heard before is just based off the blood pattern. It's a very significant indicator that only one person conducted this attack. So
yeah, at least at this point, I'm not ruling out that somebody else is involved somewhere else, but there's no proof. There's no evidence of more than one person. We only have evidence of one person. And so, yeah, you can speculate. And as I said, I can't absolutely rule out that anybody else was involved, but I certainly don't see any evidence.
Nope.
We'd be looking for things like multiple footprints in the blood pattern. We don't see that. We see one smear pattern in that lower right of that first image. We see one smear pattern. We don't see multiple shoe prints going through there. And so that would be an indicator. We don't see, I'm not aware of multiple shoe prints in the bushes around the house, or any indication that things happened so fast it couldn't have been done by one person. So all of those things in my mind tend to dispute multiple offenders at this location. But of course, I can't absolutely rule it out. All I can say is I just don't see it here.
Would you say that in a situation like this, there is a way that cases are solved most of the time? The question I'm trying to ask you is, in what way have you seen in your career cold cases usually get solved? Is it someone that's talking to somebody else and just says the wrong thing? Is it a DNA sample?
First of all, this is far from a cold case. The FBI is actively working on forensic genetic genealogy on this case, and that means it's active. That's a lead that's being followed. I'm sure that they have not yet interviewed every person that Nancy or Savannah interacted with over the course of the last months and years. And I'm sure that's still going on, and it should still be going on until they actually resolve this case. There's also, I'm sure, a number of search strategies that I'm sure have not yet been fully implemented that should continue to be implemented. So it's not a cold case, but if there are multiple people involved, yeah, one of them usually breaks down or gets caught for something else and gives up the others. But more likely, somebody who knows this offender, somebody is out there who knows this offender, who lives with, works with, plays with, hangs out with, lives next to, has some interactions with this guy.
Yeah.
And leading up to this, he was under stress.
Yeah.
And when the images were released, that stress maxed out.
Yeah.
And because of that, he likely tried to change his appearance, tried to maybe leave town for an emergency, stay away till things calm down, maybe change the color of his car, maybe cut his hair, shave his beard, mustache, whatever, or grow one if he didn't have one, but definitely try to lay low, change his appearance, get away. And before this happened, he may have been mouthing off to people around him about what his intentions were, leaking out some information without intentionally trying to,
bragging.
But also after it happened, he may have been asking a lot of questions, trying to figure out what was really going on, trying to see if anybody around him was being talked to, trying to assess whether or not he needed to run. And so those changes in behavior will be noticed by somebody around him. And hopefully those people will call into law enforcement, and that will dovetail with this genetic genealogy.
Interesting. And this is actually, I think, a really, really good segment. So, yeah, I think I have to agree with pretty much everything he said, other than the fact that I originally thought that there was definitely more than one person. But he raises a good point. There's only, right now, we only have evidence of one person at the scene, and that's porch guy. I was calling him Walmart Wrangler because of his Walmart gear, but I don't know. This guy definitely probably has acted different. He probably maybe had an attitude of grandiose prior to this. He obviously does like attention. I do have to think that he may be connected with the restaurant, like I mentioned before, that he saw the camera crew. He realized Savannah was connected with a local Tucson person and saw this as a way of getting money fast. I'm 100% positive that he did not intend for Nancy to decline after he had taken her. But I think she absolutely fought at the front door and resisted and was not going to go anywhere with this guy. And he probably panicked, lost his temper, all of the above, and, made impact with her in such a way that was the beginning of the end for him. So, just really, really unfortunate. Again, terrifying. I would never want this to happen to anybody. And I'm still so committed to the story because I just feel so bad for Nancy. I feel bad for Savannah and Annie and Cameron. It's just, I'm so happy that they are working and trying to get back to a new normal. I can't imagine not having that type of closure and not knowing where she is, and honestly imagining the worst, because the worst has happened at this point. But we just have to hope that, again, we're not sure about the hair, but the hair has been sent off to a lab in conjunction with the FBI, and there is hope that they have some new advances in DNA with hair without the root. That's how they got Rex Heuermann and Asa Ellerup's hair and or Virginia's hair. That's how they identified Rex was without a root, was on hairs that were in multiple bodies that they dug up on Gilgo Beach. So we know that the technology is there. The complicated sample, we have to hope that technology catches up sooner than later and that we don't have to wait forever. But until then, it's all speculation, and we just have to hope that the FBI does have more than we are let on, and that they do get this person, and we finally get some answers, and then everything will make sense. I really, really appreciate everybody who joined me for today. I do a lot of live content. I hope that you plan to join me for more of Crime Crunchies and my new It's Crunch Time variety show that I'm doing with multiple cases that I like to cover. Please remember to subscribe, like, and comment. Helps all those things. I will be at CrimeCon in a month. I'm looking at doing a t-shirt giveaway, so look for more information on that. I do want to thank my subscribers, so we'll do some sort of giveaway probably for people who comment something. I'll get a keyword and advertise it and give a couple winners some Crime Crunchy t-shirts. So until then, I really hope that everybody has a wonderful day. And other than that, I will catch you on the flip side.